Welcome to Builders, the podcast for leaders who want to build great company. I'm your host, Alex Snyder, strategic advisor to world-class builders. This podcast dives into the wild rides and personal transformations that come with pursuing big dreams and becoming a leader who builds incredible teams and companies. Each episode, I'm joined by a guest who helps deliver a fresh perspective designed to leave you feeling less lonely, more connected to innovative ideas, and inspired about growing your business your way. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite channel, leave us a 5-star review, and share your favorite episode with a friend. The podcast is sponsored by Alex Snyder Advisory. If you are a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with a high-performing team, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership audit and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's build. Welcome, Derek and Brad. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. I am so excited. We're doubling up on guest firepower today. So other than slight technical anxiety, I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you. It's something that really aligns with what I'm interested in, but is also something I'm so curious to always learn more about. Derek, you and I know each other pretty well because we worked together last year, but I'm going to try and keep things even. So I would love for both of you to give a little introduction about yourselves, your background, how you've gotten to where we are today.
Sure. So first off, thanks, Alex, for having us. I'll just give a quick intro. So I'm Derek Vaz. I am the founder and CEO of DVXD. We're a design studio for shared progress. So what that means is primarily we help our partners with experience design and branding. And the types of partners we want to work with are those who are impacting sustainability, equity, and health. So been operating for just over 5 years now. And we just recently expanded out to LA, which is where I am now. Our home base is in Toronto, but I'm out here with Brad, our new managing director, and a longtime colleague of mine who's based out here in LA.
Yeah, good morning. Again, thank you so much. Happy to have the opportunity to chat with you, and hope to learn as much from you and the comments that we receive back as well. So my name is Brad McDonald. As Derek mentioned, we have a long history. We met each other professionally maybe 5, 6, maybe even more years ago, back in Brooklyn in New York, working at Huge, which is one of the larger independent agencies, or even at least at that time they were. My background is in project management. I've been agency side my entire career, initially in Australia, moving over to New York roughly 2012, continuing in that discipline, being with DVXD for coming on 6 months now as the managing director. So as Derek mentioned, in addition to making sure the studio functions effectively, really just helping with expanding the horizons that we have out here on the West Coast in the US, and looking forward to helping grow the business out here as well as supporting a team back in Toronto.
Amazing. So Derek, DVXD is your brainchild, and I would love, you and I have had some really great conversation philosophically and about what this means to you. So can you share a little bit more about how DVXD came to be? Start telling us a little bit about co-creation. It's a word that I think a lot of people listening may not have heard before. So I think it'd be great to imbue a little bit of what it means to you and what it means to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to the origins of the studio bears my initials, but really we're a collective of these senior design directors. And I think all of them have meaningfully contributed to this idea of how can we use more participatory methods in the ways that we're working. I think myself, I'm a user experience professional, have had the opportunity to work with everyone from single founder startups to like Fortune 50 brands throughout my career. And the one thing that I was always told was that design is really about kind of empathy and intention, right? The idea of like how as designers can we really empathize with our audience and with our users and we're creating for. and what the intentionality we have behind that. And I think just at some point in my career, I became a little bit delusioned, especially when you look at things like climate, wealth inequity, and really started to question that fundamental idea of sort of user centricity and focusing on making individual lives sort of easier. And I couldn't really figure out at that time what my challenge was, but it just was just something irking me. And I think a series of events led to me eventually just moving on from the global design leadership role I had at Huge, and just spending time reflecting and reading and trying to go through that just a reeducation process. And that was like really on the heels of really huge social justice movement that were happening. So the Me Too movement, and it preceded what ultimately became the movement for Black Lives after the killing of George Floyd. So all of that kind of, I think, played a role into understanding how sort of social outcomes could be tied to the work I was doing. And as a parent, I have two boys. That was also something I was thinking about. What will I tell them about the career that I was having? So it was a very personal to me, but one that I was able to um, be along with a lot of like great peers, people who are my colleagues today at the studio. And so the studio was really started as an experiment to be like, okay, how do we explore different methods of science that can have an eye toward like broader sort of social outcomes? So that a little bit of the origin story, and then the how we do it is really still an ongoing process. Even just the 5 years in, we're still an infant, really, as a design agency. And I think we've been able to explore some interesting methods of first bringing our clients more into that process of co-creation. But I think the ultimate goal is really how do we develop models where we can bring users in as stakeholders, where we can understand the scale and the impact of the work that we're creating with our partners. And part of it too is just also being really selective about who we work with. We've been really lucky to work with them.
I love that you said collective as like how you view the studio and the team and how it started. And what you mentioned about this sort of reflective period in your career journey and looking at what am I doing in the context of today and how will I look on that? It's a theme that resonates with me for sure, and some of the pivots that I made. And it's actually a theme I see in a lot of my clients, which to your point of the privilege of having some choice about who you work with, I think is massive. Before we dive too much into kind of how you guys are making this work, Brad, I'd love to hear from you about what attracted you to co-creation. What's your story to that connection point?
Similar, as I said, we've been doing this. Everyone in the team is relatively senior. We've been doing what we do for a long period of time. And through that experience, you see the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of the way different teams operate and different agencies think about creation or co-creation. And I just think the focus on bringing all the stakeholders to the table, metaphorically and physically, and having that dialogue. I think you look back way our industry evolved. We've taken a lot of different aspects from different industries, but software development has been one of those influences. And the evolution and the introduction of agile methodologies has allowed us to take what was a very linear waterfall process traditionally, start to bring in some of the stakeholders and the input and the perspectives external to the studio or the agency. But in most cases, that is a very limited opportunity to assess the perspectives and use cases for the end users. And it's really only about the client and the stakeholders on the client side. Yeah, what is really interesting about what we're trying to do in the experimentation we're having with co-creation is it is arguably the next evolutionary step towards widening that group of stakeholders, including not just the clients that we're working with, the partners or the end users, but then if you look even beyond that, who else is impacted by what we're trying to do? Let's identify those folks, bring them in, and have those conversations so that what we're creating is ownable and identifiable by all of those different stakeholders. And as Derek said, I think we're still definitely trying to work it out. We are motivated to figure out the right model and the right ways to do this. But just like any new sort of discipline or approach, we're learning as.
Yeah, the pros and cons of pioneering, right? You can go out on the ledge and do a lot of things, but you also are the one learning all the hard lessons at the frontier. You mentioned agile technology, like technological development, and a lot of things that I think really resonate for us. We've both been in the product development and tech development side. Can you just give an example of how that's working, of what maybe a more traditional way and something that you guys are doing differently, just to help explain it, to make sure that it's landing for everyone and making it real for everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want to say we're pioneers necessarily. Like, first, I just want to respond to that. A lot of the approaches we're taking is built off the back of really incredible work, and happy to share these references. Design Justice, a great movement that started from the Allied Media Conference, woke Design Justice by Sasha Costanza-Chock, amazing technologist who really looked at more participatory methods as a means towards social equity and justice. The Plus Minus Lab in MIT, which was an initiative to make the MIT Media Lab more participatory, which was led by Hildreth England. We're pulling from a lot of people who have really paved the way here, and just trying to figure out how does that work in kind of an agency model. So some of the things that we've been able to do is really, and I think this was driven through the pandemic, especially, or it was enabled by the pandemic and the need for us to meet more remote. It really employed a lot more workshops in like our early discovery and strategy process. Not to say that's something that we've been doing before, but the structure of those workshops are less about trying to, from our client partners, and have them more actively participate in co-design activity. And we're starting to build a little bit of a toolkit in terms of what those activities are, whether they're more branding work or product strategy, product design, our research method. So when we do user research, really instead of just more qualitative or quantitative, looking at analytics for doing interviews, trying to do more generative design activity, try to really invite users in to have their ideas and their experiences heard. There's ultimately, like I said before, I didn't close out my thought, but the sort of previous thinking for our design practice, or I think any design practice, could be architecture, software design, is that idea of empathy and intent. Whereas co-design is really more about collaboration and impact, because empathy is always used as like superpower that designers just supposedly have, but we're always biased no matter what. We're biased by our experiences, and collaboration is meant to remove that bias. And ultimately, I think if we can figure out operationally how to make it work, we've seen it create more meaningful outcomes for our clients and the people that they impact.
I would just pick up on something Derek said. I think collaboration is a very common buzzword, but I think it's really key for successful co-creation. Given that everybody needs to come to those workshops or whatever the format is with a willingness to listen and hear before they share their own perspectives. I think if you can establish that from an operation perspective up front and have all of the participants approach the conversation with that mindset of openness and a willingness to learn as much as instruct and share their own experiences, I think that's where you will see the best results.
Yeah, I like your reference about agile too, because really we're just trying to shorten feedback loops. But I do think this is an evolution of user-centered design, and another great book or reference is Out of the Wreckage by George Monbiot, the Guardian writer. It's more political, but it really covers off a lot of history around how human ultimately our species is built on collective and our ability to work together. The only reason why we survive is right? It's innate to us. So in some ways, yeah, these are new methods of, not new methods of working, but these are adopted methods of working that I think have existed for time immemorial.
Yeah, it's tearing again. I think too, it's tearing down some of the long-tail advertising industry barriers to collective co-creation and working. So I think it's just as Derek said, it's a natural evolution back to some, and hopefully we see the results.
Yeah.
So you mentioned collaboration as the antidote to bias or a way to reduce bias. Is that just more voices in the room helps to shine a light on potential bias, or is there something more to how that works?
Essentially, I think design justice, again, has a really good framework for this, where they speak to the idea of really understanding, imagine this Venn diagram of who is participating, benefits, and who might be harmed. And that last group, I think, is one group often overlooked, and whether that's environmental concerns, or we could just think about throwing out an example there of one of the great UX patterns, the Amazon one-click buy, right? Laser focused on the idea of expediency and removing friction and making it just super simple for busy parents to be able to just get something being on a crazy day or out time or whatever. If you look at it through the lens of who might be harmed, then you start to see, okay, what actually has to happen for that one free button? How much do people working in fulfillment centers maybe have to scurry around and really overwork themselves? How the logistics of shipping maybe become inefficient and impactful, creating carbon footprint. So I think just having that level of criticality then open the door to, okay, who actually needs to be around the table? Who else needs to be around the table? And that's a tough thing to try to walk through with our partners, no matter how altruistic they are. They're business leaders at the end of the day, and a lot of what we're talking about can be perceived as friction. But I was around in the early days of user experience design, and that was also seen as friction, and then now all of the become the only way, right, to operate as a business. So I feel like there is a path where we can get there and figure it out, and really our studio, the role is continuing to try to experience where we want.
I love it. Go ahead.
I think with regards to bias, I don't think it's the solution to bias. I think it provides a platform for recognition of the bias that's inherent in everybody. But bringing those different voices to the table allow that frank conversation. And then I think Derek's example is perfect. It's you often have conversations with the client, you have very narrow and limited conversations with the end user traditionally. But bringing those other folks to the table wouldn't necessarily look or see and start to consider or understand their experience and how they're impacted by what we're trying to create. That will not eliminate, but it will bring some of those biases or limitations in perspective to the fore, and we can discuss them openly as a collective in that sort of co-creation phase.
Yeah.
And one in Toronto we can point to in recent history is the failure of Sidewalk Labs, right? The big Google-backed venture to really transform a neighborhood. And the failure of that was ultimately because there wasn't, or allegedly wasn't, enough perceived collaboration with community members. And then it just became something that the people behind it weren't willing to really entertain further. I'm not going to speak on details of it. I wasn't directly involved. I do know people on both sides. But I think there's an imperative now where we're trying to put something new out in the world. You have to really bring in the people that are going to be impacted as stakeholders, or you're just introducing a ton of risk.
Yeah. I love the example you gave, and this maybe is veering off our conversation, but I want to come back to that example because I think it highlights really interesting thing around so you mentioned Amazon and the one click, and you're making it easier for your user, your customer, to buy from you, to generate money for you and comfort for them. But potentially, if I was to take one of the potential harms, is buying one item at a time is creating a ton more shipping. And so our carbon footprint, right? Carbon footprint. And I think one of the questions that I would imagine maybe comes up is where along the line is the responsibility, right? Amazon on the far spectrum would be, we just want to make everything as easy as possible for our customer. And if they're environmentally minded, then they can curate their best, right? And then on the other end, maybe somewhere along that would be a reminder of, oh, do you need anything else? Because shipping one item is not the most environmentally friendly, to the other extreme of giving discounts, really incentivizing more environmentally responsible behavior. Are those the kind of conversations that come up when you have more perspectives in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. These are our conversations that I remember we had. So we've done some incredible work with Indigo over the years, who's done really well as a retailer in Canada and really held their own against Amazon, especially being a book retailer. And I remember some conversations we would have because Amazon's rooted in more sort of these principles and tenets that are like the joy of the table and just a different kind of operating handbook from a value set, which then translates to really interesting conversation. Similar to what you're saying. Hey, what if we allow people to potentially discount their cart if they're willing to get item like a little bit later? Or things like that, and feed back to them that they get a better choice for sustainability. So those are the types of conversations, and that's where I think creatively too, this gets really more engaging. And maybe that's part of it too, that I just got bored with technical approach and provide that new jobs. But yeah, I think it creates an opportunity for more creative problem solving and solutions when we start to think about. But I don't want to give off the impression that this is just an added burden. I actually think it was beneficial to be thinking about this with the climate.
Yeah. And I think my thinking would be, you speak of whose responsibility is it? Where is that accountability? I think one of the benefits of co-creation is that there aren't people sitting on the sidelines. You're bringing all the right stakeholders in the process, and a big thing of doing that is that there's accountability and ownership. So they now feel part of that process. So inherently, they'll start to doing that well. So it'll be less from the sidelines, comments from the sidelines. They'll feel part of that process. And ideally, there will be accountability where the right question is being asked and the answers being provided.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, Derek, to your point, it makes so much sense. The human-centered design or design thinking that I learned 15 years ago in a classroom to not evolve is contrary to the framework, right? The more creative, the more users, the more human, that just makes so much sense. I'd love to bring something back that you mentioned, Brad. You said getting people in the room with open mind. How do you do that? I think that even somebody who has no connection to design understands that bringing people into a room and setting a open-minded baseline is challenging. So is there any tip that you can share?
I think, but firstly, I'd say we have the luxury of being able to work with people that are like-minded. And admittedly, not all studios, agencies, organizations have that luxury. But to me, there's the practicality of people don't like to be surprised. So I think you will likely not be successful if you don't set the groundwork for that conversation, making sure that upfront before people turn up to say we're talking about the workshop that they aren't prepared and prepped to have the right conversation and come with the right mindset. So I think there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation and preparation that you need to do beforehand. So that, as I mentioned before, all individuals are coming to that conversation with that open mind. Any existing hierarchies outside of that conversation are left at the door as well. I think it's helpful. Often a lot of the conversations you have that are including the client, there will be established behaviors, hierarchies and relationships. They are impediments to that co-creation conversation. Like people are aware of those, but they're not really setting them aside and being open and collaborative, regardless of where that individual or that team of individuals are coming from, will often get you the best results.
Yeah, I love that. I think highlighting that there is a lot of work that happens before anyone steps into a room is really critical.
Yeah. And I think for our new partners we work with, as much as we prep them, like it's probably like a month into our engagement with them until they really get a sense of like how we're working and how different it is. And we've only had like overall pretty good experiences. Like a lot of people unprompted referred to our team as an extension of their team. Brad kind of leaned over that part, but in the beginning about the luxury of working people who are like-minded, which is the flip side of saying that we're not as maybe growth oriented as we could have been in the first 5 years of being highly selected. Like it was a choice to stay quite nimble and really only have capacity for a certain number of projects within our team. I think if we went out and tried to chase growth in a way, we would have had to figure out like an education cohort with it already along this journey or have these shared values, and it's easier for them to adapt. But it's still a process.
Yeah.
I would also add too, I think regardless of the relationship, if it's an existing relationship or a new one, and also regardless of the culture, I think there is always going to be, to Derek's point, an element of education as you go, because there is need for multiple teaching opportunities. Firstly, putting your hand up as we did at the beginning of this call, saying we're not the experts, but here's the intent, and helping them fill the gaps of their experience and their knowledge, perhaps where we can, so that they not only see the benefit of the co-creation itself, but they're learning through that process as well. And ideally, next time those individuals encounter a similar situation, they'll be better prepared as much as we would be.
Yeah. I love that. And Derek, you and I chatted about this when we worked together about growth versus kind of the right clients, the right projects, and establishing the strong foundation. So I'm curious, would you see it as if you are doing something in a newer way, actually intentionally doing it on a smaller scale with a more hand-selected network of clients and collaborators? And then there's a point where you feel like, okay, we have a foundation that will continue to evolve, but is maybe to the point where you can put together a little bit of a stronger primer and framework and start to bring in others who have the desire, but maybe not the innate resonance with this kind of work. Is that kind of what you guys are thinking about? I'm curious about what's next.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And I think that also speaks to why we brought Brad on in the first few years. I was telling the rest of the team, in a way, we were operating like a restaurant that only had chefs. There's like entry, there's no front of house or whatever. And bringing Brad on was about really exactly like you said. How do we look at what we've done, learn about the best of it, and figure out how to operationalize that so that we can do things like branch out to another location, build a team out here, and have these methods be transferable. And then further, I think just like the practice of user experience, and get to a point where this can be socialized more, and it comes to a point where people are asking for this way of working because the case studies there, the proof points are there. So I think where it's the beginning of that journey, I look back at like when we were working together, Alex, and what you were supporting us with, and we were at a sort of a different stage of maturity, and that was not that long ago, maybe like a year and a half, right? But yeah, I do think we get to that point, and then there's questions about
This is more, I think, really what's next, right?
what's next? Yeah. I mean, what's next for us and more immediately is just that, right? So the growth with Brad, a new location. I would love for us to, I should say one other thing that we're experimenting with in the peer collaboration isn't just about our studio and what we're trying to do, but how do we collaborate with others? So another mutual friend and colleague of ours, Nicole Pijot, as Inclusive, we're actually partnering with Inclusive to build on their transformative DEI work to launch a new program called Refraction. that was going to be rolling out quite soon. And Refraction is really about bringing together the participatory design and innovation method that we have built on the multi-year transformational DEI work they do as major consultancy to show how when you do have more diverse voices around the table, it is an opportunity for innovation within your organization. So I'm really excited about that partnership and where that takes us. And I think that's another way for us to start socializing the benefit of FIDS.
I love that. And yes, I am so thrilled for that collaboration. I love seeing superstars from my network connecting and bringing their, value to the world in new ways. So
that's the key to co-creation.
yeah, that's my contribution, is making connections. Oh, Brad, were you going to add something?
No, I think I was really just agreeing with Derek. I think it's, there's a lot of change underway, I think, in terms of the way we think about what we do. And to me, part of my role is to come in and operationalize aspects of what we do, look for ways to improve as well, but balance that with maintaining and persisting with what makes our studio unique. That's the balance that we need to strike. So I think that part of that challenge is, Derek mentioned and you referenced as well, is it's very easy when everybody's in the same space or even in the same location. They don't need to be physically shoulder to shoulder, but it's easy to maintain that culture of cooperation or whatever the culture may be for the particular studio. The challenge we're now facing is, as we grow, as we embrace some of the new opportunities that we have out here in the US and on the West Coast in particular, how do we bring that success and the mindset and pride that has allowed us and do such great work to this new location and then build upon it? You certainly don't want, I've had experiences, and you have as well, where those attempts have been not very well received and really impacted negatively the organization's culture. And we're very cognizant with that, right? And a lot of that is about growing and scaling with intention, not just chasing the revenue, partnering to their support with the right people, whether it's different organizations that we're partnering with, including being a great example, or individuals that we bring on into that team. We need to make sure they're the right partners for us. They're not just here for their own reasons. They believe in and for mission, and they do good work. And what I like to say is, just do good work, but feel good doing it as well. We've learned from our own experiences. We've worked with some accounts and with some clients in the past, perhaps, that we didn't feel amazing about. We're looking to strike that balance where it's doing great work with amazing partners, but there's a positive aspect to what we're doing, and we're actually making a purposeful, positive change to the individuals that we're working with.
I really want to talk about what co-creation and our shared future means on maybe a bigger scale and for the world and entrepreneurship. But before we do that, I think there's a follow-up to what you said. Doing the meaningful thing is often not the easy path. And you've spoken about the expansion and the team. And I'm just curious if there are any really key learnings or things that you think have been fundamental to how you are doing things differently internally. And I know you've spoken about a lot of senior people to start and how that's starting to expand, but anything that you guys want to highlight there for people who are interested in how is this working? And I know that you guys have a really unique culture that's absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion, for somebody who does a lot of work on teams and culture. But I would love to hear from your side.
One thing I would say is that and it's some people may perceive that as a given, but it's just having a mutual respect for the people you work with. I think it's easy to say, but it's hard to do in practice, and that often gets lost as places grow or different kind of work to the group. But I think having that common respect for each individual and then coupling that with open lines of communication, I think it's really important to not just have conversations about the topic of the day when it comes to work and moving, but on a human level, giving everybody an opportunity to share their perspectives, drawing from their own experiences, so that whatever decisions we make, whether it be regards to a particular project or just the way we are growing and building a studio, everybody has a say in that, and they feel through that process, they feel ownership. Wow.
Yeah, I think it would be a real miss if we were trying to be more participatory and collaborative with our client and not operating that way internally. So we've really from day one tried to have a very flat structure internally. In fact, when Brad came on and we did our strategic planning for the year, but we did a team offsite, one of the things we shared with the team is this idea of not your typical hierarchical structure to the organization, but more of a supported network approach where like Brad and I are actually at the bottom. Our goals are to create like strong foundations where a team to build off of and grow, ideally like their own teams around them, somewhat of a portfolio model, but more of a network where our directors, they engage directly with our clients. There's no sort of account management layer. They are, they could probably use a little bit of PM support. Like they've been doing kind of double duty for a while, but our clients value that, having somebody senior and hands-on as a trusted partner, small team. They can also combine together. So that's the difference between the traditional portfolio model where you have like anchors of directors, but now we're working on a new partnership where like 3 of our line directors are collaborating together at the same time. So there's definitely a bit of experimentations, a bit of borrowing from models that we've seen have been successful, and then really trying to mess around with the sort of traditional top-down model that you see actually a lot in the ratty design world, where there's that sort of like be at the top, and it's more of a military structure.
But classic iceberg, there's a massive team within the community of Indigo.
Yeah,
We're trying to reverse that so that the folks that are doing work are the ones that are at sort of the forefront of every conversation.
Yeah, that agency, I think we need to expand that to a lot of professional and financial services. There's often that very thin layer at the top that's exposed to the client and any other stakeholders, and then this whole institution underneath that's often quite separate. So I love that you guys have highlighted that. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of flat hierarchies, more voices, more open conversations. I love that. If we're to flip this to the other side and talk about, doing things differently, co-creation becoming a larger part of society, conversation, better understood, more leveraged, what do you think co-creation means for the world at large and for our future? Or what could it mean in a utopian future that we all aspire to?
we have these core principles of co-creation, crafts, curiosity, creativity, and then community. And I think about community more often these days as our ultimate outcome to build more empowered community. This is also deeply influenced by the Monbiot book I referenced earlier, Out of the Wreckage, which really speaks to these 2 big political narratives that we've always had between neoliberalism and socialism. But the reality in that a lot of human progression and innovation is through empowered community and common, right? And so that's my vision, which probably leans a little bit into my politics, but it's the idea of how are we ultimately creating tools, creating services, creating stories that enable communities, right? Neighborhood, things like that, to be more empowered and have agency. Because we look at sort of the Shopify model and what they've been able to do for like merchants and empowering them and really go toe to toe with like big brands in the world. That's incredible, right? But how can we do that at a community level, right? Like somewhere in between. We still need government to play a role in terms of policy, things like that, especially when it comes to like climate change and issues like that. But I think we veer too much in society, especially with tech, with this idea that every individual can be like their own little micro economy and figure things out, everything on their own. Like we figure out how we empower communities. So that to me, when you ask about where does co-creation go, I think about what an innovation looks like at communal level, right? And I don't know what the answer is, but I think it'd be interesting to explore what that looks like.
Brad, is there anything that you think in the bigger picture is the missing or secret ingredient for co-creation to become a more of a default setting, whether that be in your kind of agency world, the business world, or the broader world? Feel free to take that whatever level you'd like.
No, yeah, I think I won't comment too much on whether or not co-creation or elements of co-creation is going to solve the world's problems, but I think there is, but I think that with any new way of working, and again, I definitely agree with Derek's comment earlier that we're not pioneers. We're definitely reading a lot, listening a lot as well to our peers. But with any new way of working, there is an element, there's a period of adoption, and there'll be some resistance to any kind of change, which impacts the way people are working. There's a comfort level that people have with the established ways of working. Again, there's a hierarchy, roles and responsibilities, and a lot of the principles of co-creation challenge a lot of those established hierarchies and ways of working. So I think there is an evolutionary process here, and perhaps co-creation, as we understand it today, may not be what will end up being the successful model in 2 years, 5 years time. So I think the key for me is the dialogue and making sure that we have an openness to feedback, working with partners, providing that feedback so that we can evolve the way in which we're working as much as anyone else. And ideally, with all of the different, this conversation being a great example, sharing those experiences, sharing those perspectives collectively, we can come up with different ways of working that have been proven to be successful under the right circumstances.
Yeah, and again, this is a method of working. We're not saying there's the be all and all, right? Like really speaking from a design standpoint, a lot of in my career, my peers bought into the Apple approach, right? Where you have this small kind of working like opaque group that doing, an incredible amount of innovation and building tools every year's product we use. And therefore, we should all work like that. And design isn't by democracy. That's the one thing I've heard by my mentors over my career. When you think about it at systems level, there's room to operate in both different ways, right? Yes, I'm trying to build the next great tech device. Maybe it's a smaller group of people, but and working more closely. But I think there's a much broader lens of innovation that can happen that is more participatory, where designers can lean into more of a facilitator role. I'm not saying that there are things that I do that my team does that our clients can't do, and that's part of the reason why we're brought on. But I think in terms of the idea of who's coming up with that great idea or how are we getting to the right idea, inviting more people into that process, I think is only been more beneficial.
I love it. And you alluded to it. The premise of this podcast series is community and creating connections and bringing experiences and stories and ideas to the table to provide the opportunity for insight and conversation and the aha moment as well. It can be so easy to live in our own bubble, to not, as a strategist, I'm always say that you have to know your options in order to be able to choose a strategy, right? It's not strategy if you just do the only thing or if you don't explore. I love that you said that. And I want to bring us back to entrepreneurship really quickly as we're wrapping up. Both of you have been through varying levels of the corporate world and the more entrepreneurial endeavors and leadership as well. Of course, you're both, leading the charge now, even if from the bottom and servant leadership, as I like to call it. If you could go back and tell your younger entrepreneurial self something, what do you think is important for entrepreneurs and or aspiring leaders to know whether that be about co-creation or otherwise?
Not necessarily about co-creation, but I think they probably lend themselves to that. But I think you're a little bit more willing to take risks and take that in any way you wish, but it's taking the safe route, whether it be picking the particular project that you're working on or particular role that you're taking on. Will be safe, but you may miss out on a lot of opportunities, feel uncomfortable, and try new things, and that's when you will learn and you will grow. That's one of the pieces of advice that I would give myself. And then I think perhaps the other one is be honest with yourself and others. I think one of the great things I've learned is you need to just share exactly how you feel, your thoughts and your perspectives. And I think if you do that, people will respect you for that, and good things will happen. So it's that honesty and transparency, and take your risks.
Yeah, my advice would be like, don't do it alone. I've had the privilege to be able to, our industry is maybe a little bit unique where I can reach out to other agency owners, founders, operators, and be like, hey, can we just chat? I have these questions. And so many of them have been so gracious with their time. And I try to pay that back through like open office hours. And I've interviewed so many of them and trying to figure out like, what is that secret? Like, their thing of that. And nobody's really been able to like clearly articulate it. But one thing I observed between all the ones who were successful is that they all have partners. We talk about entrepreneurship a lot. We always think about the individual entrepreneur and that great story. And it makes me think about your big cycling enthusiast. I remember being me myself, and I think a lot of people here think about the Tour de France, right? And when in the US or in Canada, we see the Tour de France, we see the individual winner. Of course, about like the yellow. And I remember a friend telling me, he's French. And you guys all think Tour de France is like an individual sport, it's a team sport, right? And I was like, what? I had no idea about the idea of Peloton and all that stuff. And I think the same thing about entrepreneurship. We're made to think that you got to go on your own, you got to take risks. And I would tell myself, no, if you can find a great partner from the outset who can balance your skill set, that's great. If not, surround yourself with a really great, trusted peer network that you can go to. I have my wife and my partner who's also like an MBA in finance that really helped out a lot in my entrepreneur journey. Yeah, that would probably be my advice.
I love it. I think both of those are incredible points. Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm constantly preaching that entrepreneurship is not a lone wolf experience. It's definitely not the best version of the experience, at least. So thank you both for sharing everything. I've got a couple wrap-up questions I love to fire at you guys. You can always pass if it absolutely stumps you in the moment. And maybe let's just see how you guys want to do it with two of you, if you each want to answer or you want to take one and one. What is an experience that changed your life?
I go, it's easy for me. Born and raised in Australia, there's both countries, different cultures, nowadays. Very much. Experience different places, but to me, it's shaped who I am. And without that, I don't think I would have anywhere near the same perspectives. That's definitely probably the time I spend elsewhere and in other places, including studying Los Angeles. It's been a real gift.
Amazing.
I can't hit it on one thing. It's a cliche answer. We're both dad. For me, definitely would be like life was just different after we had my first son. And I think I understood time as like a precious commodity. After that, I think before that, I was just like a lot of people just were like really cavalier about how efficiently I use my time.
God, amazing.
Right. Having to put somebody before you. And
Yeah,
at least in my experience, I never really had to encounter that before I had went on.
yeah, that gravity like changes in your life, and I think really for the way we operate the business and way of lives, people who are parent operator.
Yeah.
I said travel. You said her.
Sorry.
Travel and parenthood.
Good. You put up both out there. Perfect. What does strategy mean to you?
The way it was always explained to me and the way I understood it, there's a great studio or agency out here, Normative, led by the incredible Matt Milan. And I remember a long time ago taking a strategy workshop with his, and he just said fundamentally, strategy is a plan to win, right? And I think that's the easiest description I've heard of it. There's those two components where there is an element of planning and there's an element of an objective that needs to be achieved. I think obviously there's many different ways to approach that. He was a big sportsman, is a big sportsman. I'm a big sportsman. So I think, so many ways to approach it, but fundamentally, me, that's a great definition that strategy is a plan to me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I would maximally respect strategy studying, very difficult goal, but it's taking all the inputs and through some form of magic, distilling some insights that make sense and are put to whatever the challenges are. So I think it's the thinking that then leads to the action that we
I will say though that my views on strategy have shifted. There's another great book I should plug, which is Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Murray Brown, which looked at strategy more. She looked at it from a lens of the logical approach and like the ecosystems and like how sort of strategy, as the book says, emerges really. So it's more, I think, cognizant to a lot of the variables we can control. So while you have a plan to win, most times that plan might go the way you think. So it's more about adaptability. And that, right. If I were to add anything to my definition, it would be about that element of adaptability that any good strategy needs to account for.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Anti-Fragile. Throw another book in there.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, is there a book that changed your perspective on anything in any way?
It's funny, like there were a ton of books, seminal books, and any designer in my field would repeat the same one, the design of everyday things, Don Norman, Paradox of Choice. But a lot of the things I've read more recently have been more impactful because there's almost been a re-education of out there that I've learned. And that's where I feel like I'm at in my career, that I'm almost in a way starting all over again, or having to relearn the way I've thought about design. And definitely out of the wreckage, even though it's a political book that's quite new for me. There's another book I just got from MIT Prep called Selective Wisdom, which is specifically about co-creation. I just started that, so not willing to recommend it outright just yet, but it seems very interesting. I want to pretend that there's like this fiction book also that maybe that really inspired me too, instead of all these like business books. No, I've read a few good ones, but I can't really include one there. Mine.
I'm going to leave the book recommendations to Derek. I really need to do some more reading. I read mostly fiction.
I think fiction's important. Like,
yeah, I agree. I went like really hard into the business philosophy, learning personal development, and then had to really say, actually, there's space for fiction and finding that balance. All right, last question. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to, on this one, because I didn't read the book, but I've been watching the series Foundation, which is Isaac Asimov, and I definitely want to go back and read the book. So,
amazing.
I'm rereading 1984 at the moment. It's an interesting read. I always found it interesting to reread books when you're at a different age. I read that one ages, so the insights I got from that compared to when I first read it, still working through it, but yeah, really interesting.
Amazing. All right, last question. If you could go to any concert tomorrow, touring or not, dead or alive, what would it be?
The left field question. Wow.
I like to mix things up.
Yeah. But yeah, I would have to say the Beatles. Such an obvious answer, but just how seminal they were. My mother she back in Australia when they toured, who knows when, before I was born, but just the impact they had on culture, not to mention just the amazing music they produced. I think it would be such a life-changing experience, particularly in their early phase. So not the Sgt. Pepper's or the Mr. Shaw.
Love it.
Man, so hard to do. I would say, because you said dead or alive, I would say Prince.
Prince. Love it. think I might have got that answer before as well. I love it. Definitely a very significant cultural icon. So
As genius as he was, still underrated, I think.
Yep.
love it. Derek and Brad, I cannot thank you enough for joining me. This has been such an incredible conversation. I would love to continue it, but always want to be mindful of your time. Where can people connect with you if they want to continue the conversation, or if there's anything that you want to highlight that people can get involved with? I'd love to have that in the show notes.
You won't find me on Twitter anymore since last October or X. Honestly, I think, if you actually just go to our site, there's like a robust contact us form. And I think we still have the office hours option still there. So we're 4-day-a-week studio, and Fridays are often spent doing a little bit of housekeeping, but also I do make time for anybody thinking for an internship. So I'll double check the form on the site, on our site, DVXD.co, and make sure that's up and running.
Reach out, social media, obviously LinkedIn and Instagram are our primary platforms beyond our site as well. And we do have a community-based initiative as well, which is WIN, which we go for.
My gosh, that's going to kill me that I didn't even mention WIT. So WIT, we launched this past year, and it's a co-creation event series that's meant to basically invite people in who are interested in this topic. And the first one we had, it's phenomenal. We had immigrants who were students, we had executives, and it was just like 25 or so people. We invited our friend Brad McDonald from Instead, the tiny home company based in their county, to come and speak about ways to live more sustainably. We're hoping to have a WIT event out here in LA. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. So that is, it's w-th.us with us. You can stage from there.
Okay.
But we're not hard to find. So the website dvxd.co is definitely the first place to look. But any opportunities, any interest, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out.
Incredible. Thank you both so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and we will connect again soon.
Much. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations about building great companies. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network. Sharing is caring. If you're a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with high-performing teams, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership assessment and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. You'll also find the link to join the Builders Club to stay up to date on upcoming events, get valuable tools and insights, as well as be the first to receive exciting announcements straight to your inbox. No spam, I promise. You'll also find my website, alexsnyder.com, and all the places to peep my creds, hear what clients have to say, and see if I went to the gym today. And one final note, this podcast is not intended to be legal, tax, or other professional advice. Thanks for joining. We'll catch you on the flip side.